So for this video, I made a Deathstroke mask that's inspired by the new 52. Give you the side there. And I have, of course, the headbands coming out in the back. This other side has this carbon fiber looking look. Only right here, the rest of it's just matte. And if you don't like this particular style, maybe this will give you an idea to make something that is more something that would be to your liking. So for this build, you're going to need some EVA foam. This is the brand that I use, and you're going to need at least 2 or 3 sheets of 5mm, several sheets of the 3mm, and several sheets of the 2mm as well I used for this. Next are adhesives. You're going to need some super glue, or at least some of these. I also used a hot glue gun on this for various parts, and some contact cement. As far as things to cut with, I use scissors, some razor knives, a cutting board. You're going to need something to draw with to make your patterns. Also have some razor knives here that I use to cut with. I also used some flat black protective enamel and Plastidip and Valspar orange. You can always just use craft paints and brush it on. You don't need to use these. In fact, I use a little bit of both to do this. Okay, and several other things I don't have here that I used on this that are very important are sandpaper. I use 320 grit sandpaper and 600 grit sandpaper. And I use that to sand off the areas that I had to silicone to make this look smooth and flush. You don't see the seams from where I cut the pattern out and glue it together. And the silicone that I use is an acrylic silicone with latex. And it is made by a brand called DAP, D-A-P. And you can pick it up for about $3 or $4 at a Lowe's home improvement store. And it's meant to go in a caulking gun. I usually just put it in my caulking gun, I squeeze out all of the latex silicone acrylic into a Tupperware, and I just save it for later. So that's all the stuff you're going to need to make this build. And let's get started. I've got my mannequin head, and for this I'm going to use some Elmer's glue. I'm going to slather that all over one side of this mannequin head. I'm going to take this piece of grocery bag, glue it over top of all this, and then I'm going to cover it with some duct tape. Okay. And just to give you an idea here, I just take the Elmer's glue, pretty liberal amount, and I'm just going to rub that all over. Okay, I've rubbed my Elmer's glue all over it. I've stuck the plastic bag to it. And next, I'm going to take the duct tape. I'm going to find the center as even as possible. I'm going to run this straight along all the way to the back. And then I'm going to start wrapping the duct tape around the sides. You could do a full mannequin head pattern, but you really only need half of it, because once you get one half, you can take that pattern, flip it over, and trace it the opposite way on your EVA foam, and you have the other half. Okay, and here you can see I got half covered, and the other half is open. And I use a lot of little smaller pieces just to try to get in as much detail and depth as possible as far as where the ear is going to be, your nose, your eye. Okay, and next part, I'm going to draw the pattern directly onto this before I take it off and cut the pattern out. And just because it's hard to film this and draw it at the same time, I went ahead and did the center line where I'm going to cut for this half of the pattern. And went ahead and drew under the jaw here, got it the way that I wanted. And I did all that with a Sharpie style marker. This is, I think, Bic. Yeah, it's a Bic. But yeah, same thing. And then you're going to want to also mark where your eyes are and the line for the cut here, which I'll come back and show you in a second as soon as I get it done. Okay. I drew out where the eye will be. I don't know if you can see it. I put a black line here, showing where the nose and some squiggles where the mouth will be. And I drew this other cut line because basically your main under part for your helmet is going to be 4 pieces. 1, 2, and on the opposite side, 3 and 4. Okay, so I drew this line here from basically where the cheeks meet the side of your head, along here, and then back. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. I'm going to allow the Elmer's glue, if it's not fully dry, to dry because I don't want to get my scissors all messy. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this out along the lines. But before I do that, one important thing that will help you to match everything up, remember where everything was, is make some hash marks, which are just some X's along your cut lines. And that will help you to line up your pieces. And then one quick note before I move on. Part of the reason that I use the Elmer's glue and not tacky glue or contact cement is because A, I want this to come off. I want my pattern to come off, but also it's not completely dry. I can just go through with some paper towels and just wipe this all off. That way you can use your mannequin head again and again. Okay, I went ahead and cut out the basic outline of the shape where I drew, and next I'm going to cut here. She said I'm going to end up with 2 pieces that look like this. And next you're going to need to flatten these out so that you can trace them onto the foam. And in the process of this, you're going to have to make some cuts into the pattern itself. You can see I made the one here that goes up to where your ear is going to be. And I made 2 here. And when I trace it, I'm going to trace it out, including the V notches that I made, so that whenever I use, once I cut out the EVA foam and I glue these back together and heat it, it will have that shape that the original pattern had. And I'm going to go through on this and do something similar. The second piece, being longer, of course, took a few more cuts. So I did one here on the chin, one here where the nose is, one at the brow, and then a couple along here at the points where you have the most extreme curvature when you go from the forehead to the top of your head and the top of your head down here to the back of your head. Next, I'm going to trace these onto some 5mm EVA foam. And I'm going to flip them over and trace them the opposite way and cut them both out. So I went ahead and traced out the pattern for the left side of the mask for both pieces. Now when I did this, I did extend this edge. This edge actually ended right about here. I extended it about 1/4 of an inch. And the reason I did that is because the mannequin head I have, the head is pretty close to the size of my own, except mine's a little bit wider. So I had to account for that. And now that I've done that and I've cut these out, I marked them so I know which is which. And I'm going to take this and flip it over and trace it and cut it out. And then I'm going to do the same with this other piece here. I'm going to trace it as well and cut it out. And that'll be the 4 main pieces for the mat. Alright, I've got all 4 pieces cut out. And this next part is a little confusing or a little tough. Basically what I did was I took a piece of the 3mm EVA craft foam and I placed this upon it and I traced the shape of it out. And then what I did after that was I drew out what I want the outer layer to look like. Okay. See, here's the original tracing for the cut of the eye. And going over to my reference photo, you can see there's a very, almost looks like 2 layers or 2 levels. And this is basically going to be this piece here that's going over. So I extended this bottom piece just in case, and took it out to the side here to match this part right there. And then I put the curved notch in it for the ear cover right here, and just kind of followed it around and closed it. And the nice thing about this coming out further than the original tracing is the fact that it will help hide the seams, because it's going to overlap where these pieces are gluing together. So now that I've got this drawn and figured out here, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, flip it over, trace it, and cut out a second copy. And here is the finished piece that I drew, cut out. See how it's going to layer over the other one. Okay, now that I've got all 6 pieces cut out, I'm going to take the 2 top pieces and sit them off to the side. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through and put some contact cement and start gluing these V's together so that it can get some of its curve back. I'm just going to shear it like that. Okay, so I took and ran some contact cement on these and glued them all together. You see this is already starting to give it some curvature. And did these side pieces as well. And next I'm going to take and run some contact cement along the inside here, and I'm going to attach these 2 pieces together. Okay, I've got center pieces glued together. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the side pieces with some more contact cement. Okay, I've got all the pieces glued together for the inside of it. And I also went ahead and put together the 2 shell pieces for the outside, joining the notches out of it together first and then putting it together. This was a good, well, this is kind of the first time you're going to want to, once this dries, you're going to want to try it on and make sure that it fits. And I had to put a little notch of EVA foam in here because it was a little bit tight. And the same thing on the outer piece. I had to put a little notch in here because it was just angled a little bit too much, but that was an easy fix. And before we get to gluing this outer piece on, you're going to want to take your heat gun and you're going to want to heat this on the inside. And I think it's easiest if I use a rounded object, and I just happen to have this head that I inherited randomly. And I'm going to heat this along these edges, and I'm going to press it onto this and use this rounded surface once the EVA foam is hot and flexible to smooth all this out. And first I'm going to heat and shape this. Once I get that done, it feels comfortable and it looks better, I'm going to go ahead and heat and shape this. Alright, I went ahead and shaped this, and you can see it's got a more rounded shape to it. I also put in some definition here for my ears to fit snugly, and nose and cheeks and eyebrows. And next, I'm going to take and heat this so that it has a similar definition and shape. And part of the reason I used the 3mm foam here is it's thinner and it's easier to stretch and shape, so you can get a more dramatic eyebrow shape on either side, and the nose as well. And some of you are thinking to just skip and cover one eye completely. That's never really a good idea, and the reason for that is it's very bad for your vision. And it's very bad for your vision in the respect of when you cover one eye for any extended period of time, the other eye goes to compensate. Whenever you take the mask off, your vision is going to be very askew. So if you're wondering, one of these sides is going to be covered entirely in this craft fabric called tulle. And that's probably what you'd see, that's what you'd seen at the beginning of the video when I show you the completed mask. And I'm also going to put some on the inside as well to help black this out. And I'm going to do that because, like I say, you don't want to harm your vision. Okay, so next I'm going to heat this into shape, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like before I glue this onto the outside. Okay, I went through and did all the definition on this. Some raised areas here on the eyebrows, curved the eyes in, the nose, the mouth. And now I'm going to go ahead and glue this on here, but I'm not going to use contact cement. I'm going to pass on that this time. Instead, I'm going to use some super glue. I'm going to start with the eye area and then gradually glue all the way out throughout the whole thing and get it nice and centered, but slowly. The contact cement doesn't give any sort of leeway. Once you put it on, it's on. So I'm going to start here on the eyes with the super glue, work that on, and then peel the piece back and gradually glue everything else in place the way that I want it. Okay, I've got it all glued on. It looks pretty good. Now before I do any of the side pieces that are going to go here and all little detail stuff, I'm going to go through because half of this is of course going to be covered, and it's going to be covered with the tulle. And you can get any color because you're going to Plastidip it, but tulle is a very thin sheer fabric, and it's going to help to give it a carbon fiber texture and look that the Deathstroke mask usually has on one side. And to glue this on, I'm going to use contact cement. I've made several Deathstroke masks, as I've already pointed out, and trying to super glue this stuff on is a mess. A big mess. Okay, I've got this all contact cemented on here, and I cut out this chin piece. I'm just going to go here, and I already contact cemented some of this tulle to it. And I'm also going to start working on some of the side details and other pieces. And in the new 52, depending upon cover artist or just exactly what he was doing, like here you can see he has multiple masks. Slightly different variations on them. So it's kind of up to you exactly what you want to do. This is pretty much my favorite illustration in particular. So what I'm going to be doing is going to be based off of this and another photo I found online of Jason Todd the Red Hood standing face to face with Deathstroke. Okay, so after attaching this chin piece here, I went around and cut out some circles of the 5mm EVA foam. And these are the round pieces you'll notice in the reference photos that goes about where his ears are. And then I went and cut these out, and these I'm going to contact cement here. And the reason why I drew and cut this piece first is because everything else that happens is pretty much going to revolve around where this sets. Then I drew and cut out this piece here that's going to work as the back side of the helmet. First, I'm going to contact cement all these points together to help start get it round just like the rest of the mask, and then I'm going to heat it and curve it to fit this. Okay, I got the back piece fit and glued on. I just kind of eyeballed it and trimmed it. You could probably just go through with some saran wrap or a plastic grocery bag and duct tape like we did in the beginning if you want. But I just kind of eyeballed that part of it. And instead of putting any pieces in here, I'm going to do some cuts into the foam. But first, I'm going to go through on any of these seams here in places like here. And I'm going to apply some silicone. You see one right there. And what I'm going to do is I use an acrylic silicone with latex by a company called DAP, D-A-P. I pick it up at Lowe's. And I just get some on my finger. And then I spread it out wherever I need it. I clean off the excess and then put my finger in some water. And since this is an acrylic silicone and has latex, you can get your finger wet and use that to smooth this out. And of course, it's not going to be perfect, but you let it dry for about 4 to 6 hours and apply another coat or two if you need to. And then you can take, I usually use 350 grit sandpaper and start to sand it from there. And then I go down to 600 grit really fine and sand it the rest of the way smooth. And then it'll be ready for plastidipping. And here it is after the first layer of siliconing. And I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to go back and do a second layer, and then I'm going to begin sanding. Alright, so I did 2 layers on all the areas that have seams that I wanted to cover. And once this fully dries, I'm going to sand it. And I'm also going to do a simple single layer here around this piece, just to give it a little smoothness. And then I'm pretty much done putting pieces on this. From here, I'm basically just going to take it and sand this, and any more detail I'm going to cut into the foam and heat. And the heat will cause the cuts and the little lines and details I put in it to expand. And once all that's done and all this is sanded, I'm going to go ahead and Plastidip it and then paint it, and the mask will be done. Right, I finished doing all the sanding, and I used some 600 grit sandpaper. And whenever you sand the silicone, you don't want to apply too much pressure. You can go fast, but if you apply too much pressure, you risk tearing it around the edges here. And I also went in and cut a few detail lines and used heat to expand them open. There's no other pieces or layers to that. I just cut the lines into it and heated it. Once again, roughly based off of different artwork from the new 52. And next, I'm going to Plastidip this. And once that's done, I'll move on to the painting. Alright, anytime you're going to do Plastidipping or spray painting or anything like that, make sure you always wear gloves and some sort of breathing protection and some eye protection. And always do it in a well-ventilated area. And there's the end result. Okay, here is the finished product so far. I was really hoping for black Plastidip, but they didn't have any. So, now that I've given it about 3 coats of the Plastidip and allowed it to dry, I'm going to go ahead and spray some flat protective enamel on it. And here it is all finished. Pretty happy with the way the spray paint turned out. Looks pretty good. And part of the reason that I didn't want the gray Plastidip was if I can get the black Plastidip, it already pretty much comes out looking the same matte finish. And all I really would have had to do was mask off some areas and then just spray paint it orange. Now I have to wait about 24 to 36 hours until I judge that this is safe enough to do another coat and mask it off without risk of either the paint coming off or the paint bubbling from not having enough time to cure properly before applying a different color over top of it. Alright, so I want this to remain the black that it is, but I want this other side to be this orange. So I'm going to take some saran wrap and some masking tape. I'm going to go ahead and mask all along here so I don't get any paint on my black whenever I paint this side. Okay, it's all masked off, and I'm going to point out here that I use a pretty cheap, generic brand of masking tape. It doesn't stick the greatest, but when I use some of the really nice high quality stuff, it ends up peeling off sometimes the Plastidip or the silicone or whatever. So just make sure that this is flush and flat if you're using something cheaper before you spray, because you don't want it getting under there. But yeah, always be careful when masking your props and other things that you make. Okay, I went through and spray painted it with the orange and let it dry. And I went in with a brush and some orange, pumpkin orange acrylic, and just did some low lights in certain spots so it's not overwhelmingly glossy here in the front. Like there's still parts where it's glossy, but there's parts where it's not as well. And I didn't put it in super thick on the sides, and worked out pretty well with the texture that the Plastidip left. And now I'm going to take some silver metallic craft paint, and I'm going to go ahead and dry brush it all over this to help bring out the texture from the layer of tulle that I put on it. Right, I did some dry brushing to help bring out the pattern from the tulle and give it that carbon fiber-esque look, and brush it on a little thicker in some places and a little thinner in other for highlights and lowlights. And next I'm going to do some black wash on the side and some other detail painting, and then this will be done. Right, here it is after some dry brushing with some black. Help even out some of these areas here on the side and give a little more depth in certain areas here. Also went and painted all of this black right in here. And next, I'm going to take a little bit more tulle and put it on the inside of this eyepiece to make sure that it's nice and dark so you don't just see my eyeball sticking out through there. Took a couple pieces of tulle here and overlapped them and glued them between two little cutout rectangles of fabric. And I'm going to go ahead and glue this on the inside of the mask to cover the eye hole. Okay, now that that's glued inside, it helps to make this a little darker so you just can't see the eye glaring through it, like whenever I first test fitted it. And then I took a couple strips of this fabric that I have, and this fabric is called craft fabric. I got it for $1.99. It came in a bunch of different colors. I got it at Hobby Lobby. I took and spray painted one half of it with the orange to give it sort of an orange tint and sheen, and then I glued the ends of it here into this little weird black gasket thing I have that has a orangish rubber seal on it, and I sawed it down. It actually came from a bicycle tire pump that went kaput, and I just tore it apart. Found all these weird little pieces and such in it, and I cut the ends of it at an angle. And I like using this fabric because the slightest bit of movement, and airflow, it really moves a lot. It's extremely light. It's like tissue paper almost. It's so thin. And you could also use just any scrap fabric you have lying around the house to make your own. Initially, I thought about having it come out underneath the back of the hood here, or sorry, the helmet here, but instead I decided to make this piece, and I'm going to glue it in the back here in the center. And here it is all attached to the mask. And now that this final piece here is done, the mask is pretty much finished. Well, I hope this video is entertaining and interesting, and I hope that you learned something, or maybe it gave you some ideas to build upon for your own costuming ventures at home. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.